Big Jook posted one of those captions people scroll past every day until they don't. He basically told his followers, they don't want to face you, they want to snake you. Stay alert, watch your back. And what makes that post hit different is the timing, because not long after that, he was gone. So the question is simple, but it's the kind of question that sits in your chest. Was he just talking street survival like everybody does? Or was he reacting to something that was already closing in? And here's where it gets even stranger. Big Jook wasn't just Yo Gotti's brother in the background. In Memphis, his name carried weight in rooms most people never see. But you have to understand who he really was before you can understand why his final words keep replaying in people's heads. Because the way this happened and where it happened has people convinced this wasn't random at all. Anthony Big Jook Mims was 47, and yes, he was Yo Gotti's older brother. But in the CMG world, he wasn't treated like a regular family member tagging along. Reporters have described him as a key figure around CMG, some calling him a number 2 type presence. Somebody who moved around artists, events, and business quietly, while Gotti was the face. If you look at how he showed up publicly, it wasn't like an influencer chasing attention. It was more like a man documenting access, shows, big moments, label energy, the kind of lifestyle that tells you he's connected to the engine, not just the ride. And that matters, because when somebody like that gets taken out, people don't ask, why him? They ask, who would dare? Now let's get to the day it happened, because the setting is a piece of this puzzle people keep skipping. This is the part of the paperwork that changes the tone, because it's not internet talk. This is the medical examiner documenting exactly what they observed. The report lists one of the injuries as involving the head and neck region, and it doesn't describe it in a dramatic way. It describes it like evidence, an entry point located behind the ear area, then a path that traveled through a very sensitive critical zone at the base of the skull, and finally, an exit point noted on the right side. Now, I'm not going to turn this into something graphic because that's not what this is. But the reason this detail matters is because it tells you the seriousness instantly. This wasn't an injury you walk away from. This is the kind of placement that in medical terms is considered high severity from the moment it happens. And the paperwork also avoids guessing the distance. It doesn't confidently label it as close range or far range. It basically leaves the range as indeterminate, meaning the examiner isn't going to play the internet's favorite game of pretending they know more than the evidence supports. So when people online casually say, oh, it was this, it was that, this document is the opposite. It's precise, it's careful, it's written to stand in court. And once you hear that head/neck section, it becomes even clearer why investigators treated this like something intentional, not random. But there's another detail right next to that one that most people don't understand until you translate it. Here's what the report quietly tells you when you read between the lines. The examiner isn't describing one simple point. They're documenting a trajectory, entry, internal path, and exit, like a map. And that matters because it shows the examiner is tracking direction and movement of the projectile through the body, not just listing injuries. It's the difference between something happened and here's the documented pattern of what happened. The report also includes the kind of detail that sounds boring until you realize what it means. Certain injuries had no projectile recovered, which usually points to a full pass-through. That's not me speculating. That's just the practical forensic meaning when a projectile doesn't remain behind. Then the paperwork backs it up with imaging. Post-mortem x-rays that documented at least one retained projectile elsewhere in the body, meaning some evidence remained physically present and could be handled as part of the forensic process. So, when you combine the head/neck documentation with the rest of the findings, it explains why the official conclusion is so direct. The cause of death is multiple firearm-related injuries, and the manner is homicide. And this is where the story circles back to that final post. Because once you see how the paperwork describes this, the timing doesn't feel like a coincidence anymore. Now I want to ask you this. Do you think he was speaking generally, or reacting to a real threat he felt around him. What the autopsy actually supports, no guessing. The pathological diagnosis section lists six separate gunshot wound injuries. A, head/neck region. B, right thigh. C, left leg, one track. D, left bottom. This one includes an exit plus re-entry plus re-exit across the bottom. E, left leg, a second separate track. F, right foot. Notes, 2 atypical wounds in the heel area, but it's grouped under one right foot gunshot wound injury. The medical examiner report can't tell us the exact play-by-play. It doesn't say he ran here or the shooter stood right there. What it does give us is something most people don't have. Documented trajectories, left to right, back to front on several wounds, plus a head/neck region injury and a tight timeline from injury to pronouncement. So here's the most reasonable reconstruction, and I'm labeling this as a guess grounded in those angles. It likely wasn't a calm, stationary moment. The pattern reads like a fast, chaotic exchange where his body position changed, turning, shifting, possibly stepping away, because multiple documented paths travel left to right, and several also go back to front, which can happen when someone is angled away or pivoting while trying to move. If I had to guess the shooter's general position during much of it, somewhere on his left side, at least for a portion of the impacts, because that left to right direction shows up repeatedly. Now, was he running? The report can't confirm running, but the lower body clustering, thigh/leg/foot, makes it plausible there was movement, like he's turning to react, stepping, or trying to change direction, especially with that right heel detail where the examiner couldn't clearly label entry versus exit, which can happen when angles are awkward or feet are in motion. And the buttock track is another clue that suggests repositioning. It describes a pass that exits, then re-enters on the opposite side, and exits again. Something that can occur when a body is angled or shifting mid-moment. Then you get the cold part, the timeline. The injuries are documented around 4:30 p.m. EMS arrives at the hospital around 4:45, and he's pronounced at 4:51. That's minutes, meaning whatever happened, it did happen fast. So if you're asking me to put it in plain language, this paperwork reads like an ambush-style moment. Quick, decisive, chaotic, with limited time to react. And that's exactly why police use the word targeted in early reporting. Now here's the question that matters. If the angle suggests the shooter was generally on his left side during part of it, how close were they? And how did they get that position at that time and place? Here's where this story changes, because most videos online are guessing, but this paperwork doesn't guess. It timestamps the entire situation like a receipt. The investigator narrative says law enforcement notified the forensic center that day, and it lays out a tight window. The injury scene, the transport, and when he was pronounced at the hospital. It's not written like a dramatic headline. It reads like a cold checklist, because that's how these reports are built. And that's exactly why it hits harder. You can almost hear how fast everything moved. 1 minute he's at that location, the next minute he's being transported, and shortly after that, he's pronounced. This is why people keep replaying his last post. Because once you see a timeline written by an investigator, the whole story feels less like internet talk and more like something that happened quick, in real time, with no warning to the public. But the real exclusive part isn't even the timeline. It's what the autopsy lays out next, because it answers one question clearly. This wasn't one wound. And once you hear how the medical examiner categorized it, you're going to understand why people believe this was targeted. But I'm going to keep it respectful and non-graphic, because the details are heavy. The official cause of death is listed as multiple gunshot wounds, and the manner is ruled a homicide. That alone shuts down a lot of the sloppy theories people toss around online. And the report doesn't describe one incident. It breaks it into multiple separate gunshot injuries across different areas of the body. In plain terms, this wasn't a single hit in a single spot. This was multiple impacts across different locations. The medical examiner also documents the wounds in a structured way, basically labeling them one by one like a case file. That's important because it shows the examiner is not telling a story. They're documenting physical evidence in a consistent format used in court. One detail that stands out is how they describe range as indeterminate. That's a medical way of saying the examiner could not confidently label the distance the firearm was from the body based on what was visible. People online love to claim close range or from far away. This report doesn't play that game. And another key point. The report notes that in several of the wounds, a bullet was not recovered. That usually means the projectile exited or the path didn't leave it behind in a recoverable way. But here's the part that really turns this from headline news into case evidence. The report also includes radiology results, post-mortem imaging, and that imaging confirms something specific. When people hear shot, they picture one moment, one hit, and it's over. But when an autopsy documents multiple gunshot wounds across multiple areas, it changes the entire feel of the event. It suggests intensity, it suggests intent, it suggests someone wanted to make sure the outcome was final. And that's why the last post keeps getting replayed, because now you've got two things sitting side by side. A caption warning about being snaked, and a medical examiner report that reads like a targeted multi-impact incident. Now I want you to answer this in the comments, because this is where the whole story splits into two directions. Do you think Big Jook was warning the world about general danger? Or do you think he knew something specific was already moving behind the scenes? Because in the next chapter, we're going to connect what this paperwork confirms to the bigger narrative people have been afraid to say out loud, and separate the confirmed facts from the theories. If you want the next chapter when it drops, subscribe.